Okay, so good evening, everybody. My name is Cheryl Rigger, and I work at the Dover Public Library. And tonight we are bringing you a program called Hlad, Churchill's Secret Messenger. And so let me tell you that for all of our programs, you can find them on our website at doverlibrary.org, or you can look on our Facebook page and access our calendar. You can go into the library if you're still visiting the library, and we have little quarter sheets that remind us what programs are coming up. You can pick up a few of those and keep them on hand. But there's always a way to find out the programs that we have. Upcoming in this month of June, the Kodachrome Babies are going to give a Saturday concert. It's going to be on Facebook Live, of course, so we can't promise that that will be in person, but we are starting to think about in-person presentations for like September and October. On Monday, the 7th of June, we are having Doug Lockhart. He's a blacksmith, and he's going to talk about his family-owned blacksmith shop in the Hocking Hills. So that will be very interesting. And our Loretta Marion, who used to live in Dover, was born and raised in Dover, and now lives in New England, is going to talk about, if you're writing a book, how do you get that book published? What are the final steps? So she's going to give us a little workshop about that. And then on the 23rd, we have two photographers, how to make our pictures better. When we take those shots, how we can make those better. And then we have another author, Scott Lax, who is from the Northeastern Ohio area as well, on the last Thursday of the month. So just keep your eye open for things to keep us informed and entertained during the summer months. All right. So like I say, we are recording this program tonight, and it will be available on the library website probably tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon in case you want to listen to it again or you want to share it with somebody else. All right. So let me introduce our speaker tonight. We have with us Hlad. Alan is a corporate executive, but now he's writing, dedicating lots of time to writing, and his works have appeared in many magazines, including The Bleeding Lion, Lark's Fiction Magazine, The National Underwriter, Claims Magazine, and even PC 360. Now, when you write, sometimes you need a little boost, or you need people to read your work and see how it's going, right? So he is a member of the Historical Novel Society, the Literary Cleveland, and the Akron Writers Group. So he has lots of support in the area, and we are glad that he is writing. He does live in Northeast Ohio with his wife and his children, and they have how many golden retrievers?
One right now.
Oh, just one golden retriever and a cat.
Yes.
That rounds out the Hlad family. So I want to introduce to you, this is Hlad, and he's going to talk about his latest book, Churchill's Secret Messenger. Now, if you were with us before, Alan visited us, I don't remember the date, but he visited us to talk about his book, The Long Flight Home, which was about using homing pigeons as part of the operation in the war. So, Alan, it is your program. And folks, if you have a question, you could write it in the chat if you want to, or of course, there'll be time for questions and answers at the end or comment. Okay? All right. Enjoy our evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here. Can you hear me okay? Great. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you again. I had a lot of fun the last time when we chatted about The Long Flight Home. I think it was last year, and I'm honored for the patrons of the library to read Churchill's Secret Messenger. And the older I get, the more I realize that time is one of our most precious commodities. And I'm grateful that everyone here has chosen to join us to spend their precious time with us this evening. So I thank you very much for attending and your interest about the book and Churchill's Secret Messenger. I thought maybe we would start a little bit about, since we haven't got, I think I've met a few people in the audience before, but I thought maybe we could talk a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Before I do that, I think I saw Marty. I just wanted to do a shout out to Marty. She sent me an email. She may be the longest distance person sitting in. She happened to see, she sent me an email. She resides in Pennsylvania. She sent me an email this week that she enjoyed the book, and she happened to see the that Dover was going to have this. It's her hometown paper, and she lives in Pennsylvania, and she wanted to join us. So she might be on there somewhere, but just want to give her a shout out because she's probably the furthest person away joining us this evening. But I tell you a little bit, talk a little bit about myself. I'll discuss maybe what inspired me to write the Churchill's Secret Messenger. I'll talk a little bit about research, which was a big part of this book. And I'll dive into a little bit about what I learned during my research and some of the interesting discoveries that I found. And then we'll open up for question and answer, because I'd like to have a lot of questions to keep this interactive with the group. So I'd love to hear what's on your minds and thoughts about the story, and I'd love to answer them. So with that, I'll start a little bit about myself. As Cheryl mentioned, I would describe myself as a business person, executive turned writer. So I'm pretty much writing full time, but I wasn't always a writer. I guess I got my passion for writing at a very early age. I was very fortunate to have a mother and a father that was very supportive. My mom was a voracious reader, a very artistic woman, fostered reading and writing for me at an early age. Some of my fondest memories of her taking me to our local library. I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia. It's my hometown, and taking me to the local library and just loading up on books. And I think that's where it all started, was that early reading for me as a child, and my fond memories of my mom and dad reading me books, before bedtime. So it stuck, it never left me. Now I did venture off and study business in college. So, but it never left me. When I was getting ready to graduate, it was a tough time in the job market, and I would have loved to pursue writing. But faced with, paying the bills and my rent and all those things, I gladly accepted a job at a property and casualty insurance company, where I was fortunate to have a really, really great career, and I very much enjoyed it. However, I always had this dream of someday being a writer. So I took every opportunity when I was traveling on business to write on planes and in hotel rooms, writing short stories. Took every opportunity to write articles for business journals, speaking engagements, any chance I could get to be able to work on communication and writing. I took it. And one day, I would say about a decade ago, I got really serious about, I really want to write a book. I really want to start writing. So I joined a writers group, Akron Writers Group here in Akron, and started taking writing seriously. Really helped build my craft. I can't, all the thanks. I truly believe that I would not be a published author today if it wasn't for that fostering group and the critique group that I was part of. So very thankful for the Akron Writers Group. And several years ago, I decided to write a book. First of all, I wrote a few books that will probably never see the light of day. There's sort of those practice manuscripts that you'll keep tucked away in a drawer somewhere, and you'll never want to show them. So everybody has those practice ones, and I have mine. But fortunately, The Long Flight Home was my breakthrough novel, and I was able to publish that. And it did quite. It was an international bestseller. It had done very well, and I was just very thankful for my agent and my publisher, Kensington, to take the risk on me to publish that book, and I'm very grateful. So talk about the Churchill's Secret Messenger, just released last month. I think it's been out for about 30 days. And talk about what inspired me to write the book. Actually, it was several things that I couldn't get out of my head. During my research for The Long Flight Home, my debut novel, I had researched a few other topics. And one was stories of the female SOE, Special Operations Executive, the spies in Winston Churchill's secret army that many were parachuted into German-occupied France and served during the war. Their personal stories were just stuck with me, and I couldn't get out of my head. And I knew this was a topic that I wanted to cover. There were 39 female agents out of the 470 agents that were in France during the war, and unfortunately, many of these women were captured and tortured and killed. Unfortunately, there were some number that survived, but a lot of them were captured, and you probably will see some of that in Churchill's Secret Messenger. But that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, was just the captivating personal stories. Some of these women just absolutely courageous. Some of them had families. One person I recall had a small baby, and it was and that person was actually inspiration for Rose's companion, Agent Muriel, in the book. I just thought, what a tough thing to leave your child behind and go off to fight a war to stop Nazi tyranny and to free Europe from Hitler. So I thought that was just absolutely courageous, and I knew this was something that I needed to write about. Also, there was another topic that really inspired me, and it was the infiltration. Well, actually, the Veldiv roundup in Paris, where in 1942, the French police, acting on behalf of the German government, arrested over 13,000 Parisian Jews, including 4,000 children. And they were sent to the Velodrome des Haveurs, which is an indoor bicycle racing track. And after spending 5 days of unbearable heat, little any food or water, and no sanitary facilities for these people, they were sent to Auschwitz for their mass murder. And it was just heart-wrenching to learn about the personal stories of these families that were basically taken from their homes in the middle of the night. And it was something I just needed to be told. Not a whole lot of books written about that topic. One of my favorite books, Sarah's Key. I don't know if anybody in the audience has listened to or read Sarah's Key, but it covers that topic, and that story always stuck with me, and it was a topic that I always wanted to write about. And that was the essence of Lazar's story in the book. Also, another thing that inspired me was the infiltration of the Physicians Network, which was a spy network, British spy network, that was actually a real spy network in Paris during early 1940s through 43, before it was collapsed. It was infiltrated by Nazi intelligence, the SD, and subsequently collapsed. There were many of these agents most agents were captured. Many of them were taken to concentration prison camps. And also, there were literally 100 French resistance members that were arrested as a result of that also. So I thought that was just something that I had never heard about and wanted to write about and include it in my book. And lastly, I was also inspired by Operation Columba. I don't know about you, but I love mysteries, unsolved mysteries that have never been deciphered or determined. Operation Jericho was the RAF bombing of a French prison during the war. It was actually, I think, in 1944. The bombing took place one day before over 100 French resistance prisoners were to be shot. And to this day, no one knows who ordered the mission or coordinated the mission or ordered the mission to take place. And in the book Churchill's Secret Messenger, I have my own theory on who gave the final order to commence the attack on a prison. And it got me to thinking, and I always wondered, who ordered this mission, And also, what if the person coordinating this mission wasn't necessarily who we think it is, and there was more motivation upon saving somebody that was in that prison, and they had a personal relationship, and that's what made me think about Rose and Lazar, and this would be a storyline to include in the book. So I had all these different things. I had lots of different events, and I had a huge timeline which I put out across my desk, and I wanted to weave this tale to include all four of those things, and that's how I went about writing the book, Churchill's Secret Messenger. Research. There were lots of books and research materials that I used. I was fortunate to be able to visit Paris before the pandemic and spend some time there. So that was a real blessing, especially spending some time on the streets and trying to understand what make sure you capture what the areas look like, what the catacombs feel and smell like. So that was a real blessing for me to be able to make a trip to Paris before the pandemic. Lots of books, research material on the SOE. It was really fun to research the training aspects of these agents. That was a really fun part to write, was their training, which was up in Scotland. Most of their training, at least the combat training, took place up in Scotland, in the Highlands, which made my wife very proud because she's Scottish and her family lives up there. So that was a real fun part of the book for me personally to write. Also, the stories, which I mentioned earlier, of the 39 female agents, I actually took time to read everyone's story and learn a little bit about them. Read some of them I was able to get my hands on some of their actual training performance, how they were performing during the training. And some of the agents were actually almost kicked out of training because they were considered not tolerant of following rules. But some of the people in the SOE believed that was exactly what you needed. You needed someone that was a little bit rogue, a little bit difficult in order to survive in German-occupied France. So that's what got them through training, and some of those agents that didn't follow rules turned out to be some of the very best performers in France. So, and I tried to capture that in Rose's behavior a little bit. She didn't necessarily follow the rules, which was a lot of fun to write. Also, Churchill. I can't forget Winston Churchill. I spent many hours reading and listening to Churchill's speeches to understand how he speaks. And but most importantly, I really wanted to find out, learn more about Churchill, other than what you hear about typically his war experience. I wanted to understand him more on a personal level and what people think of him. There's a great interview by Joy Hunter. She was a typist in the war rooms. Her account I was just taken back by her description of Winston Churchill. She described him as humorous, fun, witty, and I'm like, that's not the Winston Churchill that I know. I hear him as being harsh and difficult, and a person, a right leader at the right time, and but she really gave a totally different account of him. And when I dug in further and learned more about his passion for his golden orf, his goldfish at Chartwell, his house in England, and how he loved to feed his goldfish, and he liked to paint, and all these things that I didn't know about Churchill that I tried to incorporate into the book. So that was a real pleasure to learn about, was another side of Churchill that I didn't know about. A couple other areas, Ravensbrück concentration camp. There's not a whole lot of older books written about Ravensbrück, simply because it fell when the concentration camp was liberated. It was liberated by the Soviet Union, and it fell behind on east of into the Soviet Union's hands, and a lot of the records weren't revealed until much later. There was a great book, and it's a challenging read because of the graphics, but I learned a lot about Ravensbrück through Sarah Helm. She wrote a book called it's history book on Ravensbrück. It's called Ravensbrück, and detailed stories of the people that were imprisoned there, and just really tough stories. And for Churchill's Secret Messenger, there was, I know there were some areas that were challenged to write, and I can imagine for a reader too. But I had to taper some of that back a little bit while writing Churchill's Secret Messenger to make sure it was palatable for readers. Because it was some really horrific crimes that took place, and I tried to capture that without not going into too much detail. So I hope I struck a good balance for readers with Ravensbrück. That was a challenge for me as a writer. And I'll talk a little bit about real characters during my research. One of the things I loved about writing this book that was a lot of fun was I was able to weave in many real characters. In addition to Churchill, General Charles de Gaulle was a lot of fun to incorporate and have their relationship between Churchill and de Gaulle, which was really, they had what I would describe as a bantering type of a relationship. And I tried to portray that in the book. Let me see, Captain Selwyn Jepson was a recruiter. He played a small role in the book, but I think that it's worth noting Captain Selwyn Jepson was a recruiter for the SOE. And he goes on record saying that he believed that women were far more suited for the role of spies than men, that they were better suited for his words were lonely courage. They were better suited for lonely courage. And he was a real proponent of getting female spies into the SOE. So I felt it was important to get him portrayed in the book. Major Maxwell, he does the training up in Scotland. He was an outdoorsman, and actually he was a fiction writer of all things. But he was an outdoorsman and had former military experience, and he was a real trainer for the SOE during the war. And let me see, there's Joseph Kiefer. He was head of the SD, played a small role. Certainly I didn't portray him to be a very friendly person, which he wasn't. There's lots of stories about him, and his role was very brief. Also included Dominique Ponchadaire, and he was a French resistance, led a network in France. And he, in France, he's credited for as being the person who coordinated Operation Jericho. So he's one of the theories that he was the person that led to Operation Jericho, the bombing of the prison to free these prisoners. And there's other theories that it was the SOE or MI6, and even Winston Churchill himself played a role. So that was really fun to include all those real characters in the book, and hopefully I portrayed them. And if any of their families get a chance to read it, hopefully they will be pleased with what they see. So, but with that, I'll turn it over for questions. I'd love to hear some questions from the group about what they'd like to know about the book.
Okay, now is your turn to shine. Ask a question, tell us something that you want to know or that you want to comment about. Can you raise your hand and say, have you read the book? I know that at the library there's a long wait list, but have you read it? Have you had a chance to read it? I have. Okay, good. All right. So several of you have. Would you like to comment about something that you read or something that Alan has said about his writing process, his research? How long did it take you to write the book?
Churchill's Secret Messenger took me 1 year. to write. My debut novel took me about 3 years to write. This took me 1 year. And part of it was because I had a contract, I had a deadline with my publisher. So after my publisher was out, I had just released well, actually they hadn't even released the Churchill The Long Flight Home yet. They signed me to 2 more books. So I was in contract for a book a year. So I was really busy writing. So I had 1 year to do this book. So a lot of crunch.
Actually, you were fortunate that you went to Paris before the pandemic, because that provided you such an experience to set the book in and really have a contact with that. So then you could sit in the pandemic and in the isolation of the pandemic and write to your heart's content.
I know it was I actually had most of the book finished by the time I got to Paris, but it really helped me do revisions and to polish it and to make sure that I'm making sure things are accurate. So it was a real, I think, felt very fortunate to have made it there in time before the book was released.
Yes, Marianne, unmute yourself. Marianne, can you unmute yourself? Do you see how to do that? Down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little microphone. Can you press that button? There you are. Now we can probably hear you.
I haven't read the book, so I just was wanting to hear what everybody had to say. I've read other similar books that have the same topic, so I was interested in it.
Yes. And Mary Jane, did you have a question or a comment?
Well, I really enjoyed the book. I wondered why Rose was such a little person, that she had to do such difficult things, was able to, riding a bicycle 200 kilometers. It's just amazing to me. And, and it's always like, I've read about Ravensbrück and the Lilac Girls. That was the first time I was introduced to that.
Yeah.
And I was surprised there were 40,000 women there. I had no idea that it was that large. And it I don't know how people treated people like they did. It just amazes me that it continued for 4 years or 5 years and that nobody stopped them.
I know. It's such a tragedy. And thank you, Mary Jane. I appreciate the comments. You mentioned about Rose being small in stature. And I didn't want to make it easy for Rose. I wanted her to be someone that was, despite all odds, she was able to achieve great things. So I made her small in stature and big in courage. And clever. She's very smart. So
at least ended up happily ever after at the end, since the others.
So it was not easy. It was, and sometimes war stories don't always turn out that way. That's for sure. But some of her events, like you mentioned, her riding a bicycle like a few hundred kilometers and to get a wireless transmitter, and that was, I'd like to say that I came up completely with that story. But some of the things that Rose did was inspired by real acts that took place by some of these agents. In fact, Nancy Wake was an SOE agent that actually bicycled a couple hundred kilometers for a wireless radio theirs was broken. She had to go through all of across France on a bicycle to try to get a wireless radio for their network. And so this I would thought was, and she described that event as of everything she went through during the war. She said that was the most difficult thing I had to do. Was that bicycle trip, avoiding, going through all the checkpoints with German soldiers being questioned, and she used what she described as her sex appeal to be able to make fun of with a German officer when they questioned what she had in her suitcase. And she actually joked with them jokingly. She goes, "Oh, I'm a spy," and she flirted with them. and of course, he's going to look like an idiot if he says, no, yeah, show me your suitcase. I want to see what's in it. Because he doesn't want to look like a fool when he asks her to open the suitcase. So, so some of Rose's antics that she did, even when she broke into her, during her training, she broke in and forged her report. And that was actually took place. So it was actually one of the agents during their training, when I was doing research, had actually broken in and changed their report. She wasn't quite as humorous as Rose, but that set my wheels thinking, okay, this would be really a good act for Rose to do, to get in and break in just before she's getting ready to be kicked out of training, to go in there and change her report and show that she's exactly the type of person that they need as a spy, someone that can break into an officer's quarters and change the report. So.
Is it true that they could not release anything for 100 years?
No, that was something I came up with to just give some curiosity to the book, to like, yeah, this could happen. Because there's many of the events that took place. The Physician Network was a real network that collapsed during the war. A lot of these events were real events, Operation Jericho. And I just used this. What I did was I researched the protocol for secrecy in Great Britain, and they did have some things supposedly confidential for 100 years to ensure that it wouldn't jeopardize any of the people involved in these acts. So I took some liberty and said, well, this is what Rose and the Conjurer Network is going to be confidential for 100 years. And what I tried to do essentially with Rose and the Conjurer Network, her spy network, was to essentially drop them in as a sub-network to Physician. So everything going on in Paris at that time was actually taking place. So it was, although Rose is fictional and her network is fictional, everything around them is actually taking place. So that's how I approached it.
Is I'm from Michigan.
What was that?
From Michigan. Michigan.
Yes.
I'm not from Ohio.
Oh, from Michigan. I'm sorry. I thought Michigan.
Yeah. So, and I also saw it on the online that you were having this, so I signed up for it.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think during these times of the pandemic, people have been kind of looking at places to find things that they don't normally look at because there's so many wonderful programs out there. Great. I think one of the advantages that Rose had too is being small, besides being female, but she was small, people probably wouldn't suspect her as being a spy, and she was selling makeup. So I did wonder about that because, her makeup, who had money at that point and who was wearing makeup, but she found her client, didn't she? A very important one then, as a spy. So.
Yeah, it's usually sometimes it's a wealthy collaborator or someone that's, that has the means of getting makeup. So actually Pearl Witherington, if you're into research, Pearl Witherington, she was actually an SOE agent, a very successful one that actually became a network operator herself. She was a traveling cosmetic salesman. So that was her cover story. And I thought that was really unique. And I used her. She was in not southern France, but I think she was near Bordeaux is where I think she was where her network operated. But I used that as inspiration for creating Rose's cover because I thought that was brilliant, because you're going to get networking with people that probably have some money that in times of war, no one was buying makeup except for, the very few people, and those few people were connected. So.
So in the research process, is it difficult? You say there are plenty of materials, but are they easy to track down and get your hands on them? Or did you do a lot of internet articles, that kind of thing? Or
It was a combination. I would say, and we're living in an age where research is much more available for writers. I can't imagine being a writer pre-internet. It would have been so difficult to research things. And for example, before going to France, I can just get on to Google. And actually walk the streets of Paris and see it. And a lot of it hasn't changed. There's a lot of historical monuments, and walking through the Montparnasse cemetery and seeing what it looks like. People can do that without having to get on a plane, which is just remarkable.
Yeah.
So so that's I use a lot of different resources. Books certainly were the main resource, mainly true history books. I quote some of those in the back of Churchill's. Some of the ones that I really liked, I used them. I mentioned them in the back of the author's note of the book. Certainly Ravensbrück, not a whole lot available, but I would say the best information out there is Sarah Helms's book. Her history book on it is just incredible, well detailed, thoroughly documented, and I think that was a terrific read. Churchill, there is just tons available on Churchill, but what's lesser available is some of his personal stories. So I was able to do some research and get in some of the archives. Chartwell, it's now certainly a museum. His mansion that he has in I think it's in Kent. The people there in the archives, they have some wonderful things about him that you wouldn't normally see in most of the press. So that was a real great source of information for me. So, but yeah, there's lots of different avenues now for writers, and I use them all: internet, library resources, books, you name it, audio, speeches,
Yeah.
and even video. If anyone has a chance, you can go on to YouTube and listen to Joy Hunter's interview. It's Joy Hunter. Just type in Joy Hunter typist Churchill, and you'll get a chance to listen to her story about Churchill.
Wow.
Which is really pretty neat. And also Operation Jericho, there is film footage from British Path, published the actual film from the bombers that actually bombed the prison. And there's a number of little documentaries on Operation Jericho that are available that were produced during the war, which is really sort of neat because you had the flavor of, this is being produced right after it happens. And so you get the tone of it and how people are feeling it at this time in the war. So that was a really great video to watch. So it was a film video, and I think some of the film videos that they would have played in the theaters, for people would have flocked to the theaters every week to watch all the films that capture what was taking place in the war before you'd watch an actual film. Would have been really, really neat to see. So, but I watched some of those. That was really good. And one last thing I'll mention too is there's I can't remember. It's quoted in my back of my book, but there's a movie that was produced about the SOE. I think it was called. Probably have it here somewhere in my notes here, but it's in the back of my book. But it's a movie about the SOE. It was produced by the British government, and it was right after the war. And they basically revealed their training and what they did for SOE agents. And that was really compelling. So the title of it's in the back of my book.
Okay. I have a process question. So like in high school, they always tell us to make 1 million note cards of our sources and our things that we want to include in the writing, right, in a research paper. So when you had these real characters, or you had historical characters that you wanted to incorporate into, how do you lay out? Well, you said you had a spread, like a sheet in front of you of how it was going to go. Then do you take the idea and just kind of find a place where it fits in, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. So, so, but what I do is I start with a timeline that I put key historical events, and in case for Churchill's Secret Messenger, it's from the start of the war all the way through the end of the war, and the epilogue, it takes you to well after Churchill's funeral, and it's at the end of the war. And so I put a timeline together with key historical events. It's sort of my guardrails. It's sort of like, for me, it's like going bowling, and I have these guardrails up where I know I won't get a gutter ball. So that's how I approach that. And then what I do is I spend a lot of time on character development for fictional characters as well as non-fictional characters that I like to weave into the book. So I do research on each one of these characters, and I put some bullet points about what motivates them, what are their hopes and dreams, their fears, not just what they look like or how they behave, but what really makes that person tick. So I do that for both my nonfiction or my real characters as well as my fictional characters. And some of them I know when I embark on writing the story, I have a synopsis. I have like sort of an idea of how I'm going to start the book, what's going to happen, the main events, and how the book's going to end up. Usually when I start a book, I sort of almost start with the end in mind. Before I even wrote the first page of of Churchill's Secret Messenger, I was thinking about an Operation Jericho, and I was thinking to myself, what if the person who masterminded this bombing raid had a personal motivation in order to organize this? And that was how I created this between Rose and Lazar. So I start with the end in mind, so to speak, and then I basically write. So I'm sort of a blend between, I would describe as an organic writer, someone that just wings it and loves to go and see where the writing takes them, and a person that is drafts out a plot and know exactly what's going to happen. So for me, that keeps me sort of on track, yet hopefully gives some spontaneity and surprises for readers. I hope that readers get some enjoyment of not knowing what's going to happen next. Because I know as a reader, I'm always trying to guess what happens next. That's our natural tendency. So, but that's really how I approach writing. I said sort of a blend, and
that's what I said before you guys all came on, Alan. I was telling Alan that every chapter ends with a sentence that makes you want to turn the page, even though you're supposed to be sleeping now. You want to turn the page and see how that chapter ended. It was brilliant. I mean, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. Because sometimes you get that every once in a while in a book, but this, I really, I could probably count and see it's every chapter ended with something that took you to the next, that just brought you along. So it was really great. And of course, we all wanted Rose and Lazar to be together in the end, but there were a lot of moments, lots of tense moments when we didn't know how that was going to turn out. And plus, I really think that, you commented about how you had to find a balance between the horrific things that happened to them and how to make it something that people wouldn't say, oh, I can't read that, I have to put it down. I think you struck that balance because it really did. You gave us enough information that we knew what was going on, but we didn't have to read through the most horrific accounts of the torture and just the anxiety. So, but we could imagine it, like the bombings and everything in London. The description was such that we could absolutely imagine it.
Good. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm honored. Those are, writers strive for, how readers feel and how they experience. That's what it's all about. Is, for me, when I pick up a book, it's how it makes me feel. If it makes me, puts me in the moment, and I feel like that I'm there, then and that I care about the characters and where this thing goes. So, so thank you so much. That's what we all strive for.
Yeah. And so I'm curious about your writers group, your Akron writers group. I know that our library has a writers group. They haven't been meeting during the pandemic, but in June, we are opening up our meeting room. So I'm thinking the writers group will come back. I hear that they bring things, they share with each other and get each other's, like, when you get in a group like that, you learn to give a critique, a constructive criticism to help the writer, like you say, hone their craft into something that's really great. So
yeah, the Akron Writers Group, I can't say enough good things about critique groups. For people that enjoy writing or aspire to write or build their craft, it's a great way, because one of the scariest thing for anybody that's writing is to be able to share their work for someone to read it. It's really intimidating to be able to put your heart out there and just on a platter for someone to read it. And but for me, the Akron Writers Group, it's a group of oh goodness, we have writers that write all kinds. I write historical fiction, of course, but we have people that do science fiction. We have some people who do memoir. We have, you name it. We have all different genres represented in that group, and which makes it sort of interesting for us to learn and build our craft. And but with a critique group, you really get a chance to understand how a reader's going to feel. And experience how they're going to interpret this. So I think you mentioned that you enjoyed how the chapters end and that they're entertaining. You wanted to read more, and that's one of the things I think a critique group has helped me, because when I submit to a critique group, and I still do, I wasn't able to, because I'm producing the book far faster than I can let everybody read it. Only a few people read the entire book from my group, but as a mass group, they critique a few chapters at a time. But it's really fun to be able to give someone a few chapters to read, and you write it in the back of your mind. You say, I want to really entertain somebody for these 2 chapters, and want them to read the next 2 chapters. So that mindset in a critique group is invaluable, I think, for any writer. So if anybody's out there has aspirations to be a writer, I encourage you to engage in a critique group. There's lots of them out there, whether they're online or in your local community or your library. Please seek them out. They're just wonderful resources.
And other people in your writers group, are they published authors as well?
Some number published as far as like magazines and I'm the only person in the Akron Writers Group right now that's novels, that's published novels. Now we have some people that have written novels and are currently in working on submitting them to agents as we speak. So keeping my fingers crossed for them. Some really good writers in there. I feel very fortunate to be a published author, and there isn't a day that I take for granted that I get a chance to do something that I really, really love. It's really, really difficult to get published, and to get an agent first, getting an agent's attention, getting an agent to fall in love with your work. And then after that, getting a publisher, an editor to fall in love with the story too. So it's really difficult to get published. And I feel very fortunate to be in this spot where I'm writing books and have, more books that I'm writing I have more books after this one. So,
so that's what I was going to ask you. You have a contract for a 3rd book, right? Within a year.
Yeah.
So how's that going?
Yeah, good. Actually, I signed a 4th. So now I'm my 3rd.
Okay.
So my 3rd is finished. It's called A Prelude to Light. It's set during World War I, in Germany. between Germany and Oldenburg, Germany, and in Paris, not Paris, but France at the front in the trench warfare. So it's set in Oldenburg in 1916 when the first guide dog school for the blind was established. So it involves guide dogs, something I'm a dog lover, so it's going to involve guide dogs, and did some research about guide dogs, and was inspired to embark on writing this story that I didn't know much about, the origins of the first guide dog for the blind. It was really based upon blind soldiers in Germany coming back from the front, and what spawned the first guide dog school. So it's based on that. I won't give you any spoilers, but that was a book that I wrote during pandemic. It was a challenge. I mean, we were all hunkered in, and that's what I did during pandemic. I was hunkered away writing A Prelude to Light. And right now I'm starting my fourth book. It's set during World War II, and that will be released. Prelude to Light will be released next April, and this will come in probably a year after that.
Okay. Great. That will be wonderful. Now, by then, Alan, we hope that we will still Zoom if you can't drive to Dover, but.
Oh, I could drive to Dover. That's close. So
okay. So we'd love to have you in person now for our Michigan and for our Pennsylvania person. That might be a drive. So,
yes.
We have talked about it at the library. Zoom is so convenient. People can, I took a cooking class with a person from Alaska. So it's like, it's so convenient, but at the same time, I think we have to figure out, we're talking about how can we do it in person for people who want it in person, and how can we reach out? We might have to do some hybrid things. So, yeah. So I think, I think there's all kinds of possibilities with technology. And of course, your friend Marty is saying that, Marty, is this a she? I'm sorry. Anyway, she's saying that she is anxious to read the book, and she's thankful that you were with us tonight. And I think we all agree. So thank you very much. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Well, if you haven't had the pleasure of reading the book, you must put your name on a list, get it, because it really is a page turner. It's very informative about the war effort and about how, when we read about history, sometimes we're focusing on the big event, but all of those small lives are actually what makes up those big events, because those are the most important participants in the big event. So, and it's easy, it's interesting to see and important to learn about history. And I think writing these, writing historical novels like this are a really great way for people to get a grasp of what happened and what is happening. So it's a very interesting way, and people don't say, oh, history, So it's an exciting way to present the material to us. Yes. So I want to thank everybody who came out tonight, and to enjoy our Zoom with us. And I especially want to thank Alan for getting on with us and telling us about his work and how he puts it all together and how he gets that book that he comes up with that is so good for us to read and for us to learn from, right? So we all appreciate that. And thank you, Alan, for coming to be with us, and just keep watching the library website, because you never know what else might come up that you will be interested in. And if you have a topic that you want to hear about, I'm all ears. I'm looking for interesting things all the time, and I am willing to hear what you'd like to hear about, and I will talk about it. Maybe we should have a session about guide dogs.
There. I'll be
Prior
all ready
to-
next April for you. So we'll
That's
do it in
right.
person.
So maybe in March, I'll have a session about the guide dogs, and then we'll have the book in April. But yeah, that would be great. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the evening, and everybody take care of themselves. And perhaps the next time we will see each other in person.
Thank you,
That would be
Cheryl. It's
great.
always a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We always have a great time. Okay, thanks so much.
Take care. Happy reading.
Thank you. Bye.